Admiral Blair, Admiral Harris, before this committee on a number of occasions, has said that he's getting a very small percentage of intelligence requests that he continues to make. And one of the concerns that he has voiced is the potential for miscalculation on the Korean Peninsula. Do you agree with that assessment? And what should we be doing right now to make sure we have all the intel we need, ISR and so forth, to make good, solid planning decisions for North Korea?
Senator, I'm not going to second-guess somebody who has the job that I used to have, so you'll have to press Admiral Harris on that probably in closed session.
Well, we'll be happy to do that. Thank you. Dr. Green, we've talked about Russia a number of times, but Secretary Tillerson just earlier this month actually in a speech said that it's apparent to us that Russia is not implementing all the sanctions, and there's some evidence they may be frustrating some of the sanctions. Reuters just last week actually revealed that there's shipping of coal going to Russia is being transshipped to places like Japan and South Korea, of all places. What can we do to ensure that Russia is not frustrating our efforts? And then secondarily, what can we do to help bring Russia into a constructive conversation around this sanction implementation?
It's an excellent question, Senator. And for all the difficulties we're having with Moscow, I would not paint them as 100% against our strategy on North Korea. For example, in my own experience working this problem in government a decade ago, the Russians take the nuclear piece of this very seriously. If we were to have instability and collapse, or somewhere down the road a diplomatic agreement for nuclear disarmament, Russia's role would be critical. We'd want to get fissile material out. Russia has experience demobilizing nuclear weapons and so on and so forth. There is a potential role for Russia. I also have the impression that in the Security Council, the Russians are less obstructionist than they were. It's a slight improvement. However, as you point out, in the actual implementations of sanctions, the Russians are backfilling. And the Chinese will complain officially, if you ask, that the Russians are, moving in and providing cash through a variety of means to backfill for China, and they're doing it to have influence. They want strategic influence with us and our allies, and I think their view, this was my experience in negotiating with the Russians in government, their view is if they have the best relationship with Pyongyang of any of us, they'll hold all the cards diplomatically. We need to disabuse them of that, and there have to be some consequences to them for the way they are helping North Korea get around sanctions, even in cases where China is implementing them and Russia's backfilling.
Thank you. Admiral Blair, you made a comment earlier I happen to strongly agree with, and that is that we have not seriously implemented sanctions on North Korea. They're actually the fourth most sanctioned country in the world right now, behind Russia, Syria, and Iran. What should we do to up that ante? All three of you are talking about that as a possible deterrent, but be specific, particularly with regard to China, in terms of how can we up the pressure on North Korea relative to this sanction regime?
Senator, I think the other countries of the world dealing with North Korea fall into two categories. Those which are shameable, and if we simply bring it to their attention that their currencies are being counterfeited, North Korean workers in their countries are sending money back home and forming potential assassin squads within their countries, they will do something about it. They just haven't done it because it's a high priority.
You're talking about the exported labor from North Korea?
I'm talking about Malaysia and the 1,000 workers who were there. I'm talking about countries in the Middle East that use imported North Korean laborers for their own purposes. Those countries, I think, if we go to the intelligence effort to identify all of that, then our ambassador walks in, tell them, listen, take care of this. Okay, we'll do it. And then we just follow up. So that's one category. Then there's the other category, like China and Russia, who try to calibrate their support to North Korea to keep the survival systems alive, but not enough to be accused of violating sanctions. Those are the ones that Dr. Green was talking about, that we have to go in with the very specific information with sanctions on those Chinese or Russian companies which are conducting this, which will prevent them from using our banking and financial system, which has been very effective in the past, or for other snapping their garters in other ways that we can do quietly, and that's more effective. And public shaming for them has some effect, but generally it's a badge of courage there in China and Russia to be criticized by the United States, so we have to play that pretty carefully. It's best done by smiling and then jabbing them with the stiletto. So it's a complicated diplomatic effort. It's a very complicated intelligence effort. We just have to get organized, as we have for other important things, and do it and sustain it, and that will have the desired effect. Back when, as I said in my written testimony, in the mid-90s, when the Soviet Union fell apart and their explicit subsidies to North Korea ended, the overall inputs that external trade coming into North Korea dropped by 50% roughly. The result was mass starvation, complete collapse of the economy, and North Korea had to completely recalibrate its policies. So they are affected by outside pressure. They've stabilized their economy recently. They've managed by both illegal means and by countries that are willing to keep them on life support to get a fairly decent flow of what they need from the outside. And we need to end that, and they will react.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On behalf